I had always been aware of the large number of horses that get sent to auctions because they are untrainable. But it wasn't until I found my own facility to rent that I could start doing something about it. Huckleberry and I put in some long hours getting everything ready for some new horses, and after a few weeks we were ready to go to our first auction. I purchased 3 horses to rehab and got started on their training. After the first 3 had moved on to their new homes, it was time to start looking for some more horses that needed my help. Although I do prefer to go to auctions, I decided to put an ad out online to see if anybody had any problem horses they were willing to sell me for a reasonable price. I got a few bites, including this one that happened to be not too far from my house. The owner had sent him out for training, and for some reason they were having a hard time getting him started. This horse had only been at the trainers 2 weeks until he pulled the plug and told the owner that he was untrainable and very dangerous. When I got to the trainer's barn, I saw a horse that was running frantically around his pen. The closer I got, the more obvious it became that something was not right with this guy. He had old saddle marks on him, as well as rope burns around all 4 of his legs. The tops of all the panels in his pen were bent from him trying to jump out. I also observed several indicators that he was suffering a great deal of pain. When the trainer finally came out, he told me the horse was way too dangerous for me to get in the pen. And when I told him that I wanted to buy this horse, he just laughed at me and told me the horse was only for cowboys. It was obvious that the opposite was true, and this horse was just too much for this horse trainer, and he did not want to admit it. I remember calling up my mom and telling her I wanted to buy this horse just to prove that guy wrong. The owner had wanted $1,500, and I really couldn't swing that with all of the improvements I was making to the new barn. So like any other millennial in my position, I went to the internet to see if I could find out any more information on this horse. The following clips may be upsetting to some viewers. You are welcome to fast forward to the 3-minute mark to skip them. This is the horse's very first day in training. While this may not look extreme to some people, it would be the equivalent of you meeting a new person and walking up and punching them right in the face. If this is the way the trainer acted in front of the horse's owners, I can only imagine what he did when they were not watching. As soon as I got home, I counted up my future horse fund and called the owner and said that I wanted to take him. Unfortunately, by that time, the decision had been made that he was going to go to the loose horse sale and be sold to the highest bidder. I didn't know if I was going to be able to afford him, but I had to try, and when the bidding was over, I ended up taking him home for only $245. I don't know if it was plain pride or spite, but at the auction, the trainer let everybody know that this horse was only good for dog food, which is probably why he was so cheap. When I got him home, I noticed both of his hind legs were swollen. He had rope burns around his flanks and on his sheath, as well as 1 rope burn on his leg that was almost down to the bone. I gave him a few days off to decompress. His body was sore and he had a little bit of lameness to his gait. The trainer had told me that I would never be able to catch this horse in a large pen, but after only a few minutes, I think this horse understood that I was not going to hurt him. His name was Pete and it really suited him. I decided to start his training with some very simple exercises to build his confidence. To my surprise, he was very brave and outgoing around new things. He caught on a lot faster than I had anticipated given how he was treated by the other trainer. While he was working on obstacles, I taught him some very simple cues for lunging. The first couple sessions were a little bit dicey because he was really terrified that I was just wanting him to run around frantically. Eventually, he learned that he was allowed to relax and go slow, and I was finally starting to see the possibilities with this gorgeous horse. He had been through a lot in the last month, and the cough that he came home from the auction with escalated into full-blown pneumonia. The stress from his training, traveling, and then being in a loose pen with a lot of other horses really tipped him over the edge. I gave him a lot of time off and antibiotics. At this point in time, I was still training outside horses, so I was still able to keep pretty busy. He got to have several months off of just being a horse, and when he fully recovered, I was able to saddle him for the very first time. He did have saddle sores from the short time he spent at the trainers. I decided instead of pushing his under saddle training that I would take him out and see the world. He went to different barns in the area with the other horses. He gained a lot of confidence being around other horses that could show him the ropes. This helped him immensely.
Good boy, Pete.
When the summer was over, he was happily carrying a saddle around and listening to simple commands on a lunge line. He was still a little bit shut down around the other horses, but Tiny made sure he always had a friend. If you've seen my channel before, you know that Tiny loves to make the horses fall in love with her, and she did the same with Pete. Another winter came and went, and along with it, more horses went through my training program, but Pete stayed. In the spring, I brought him in the barn so he could have his own space and really focus on being started under saddle. He had a lot of trouble seeing me up on his back, so I spent a lot of time getting him comfortable with me just hanging out on top of him. This is a very low stress way that I like to start all of my horses to make sure they're comfortable with having a human on their back. This did take Pete a lot longer than most horses I get in, and Tiny could always tell when he was having a bad day. She would even come and lay down on the outside of the round pen and watch us work. Even though he did still have days where he was extremely stressed, Pete was making a lot of headway in his training. He became best friends with Gus, and eventually it was time for me to climb on his back. I typically start my horses and get on them from the ground, but Pete had a very extreme reaction to me. The very first time I swung a leg over him, he got so scared he collapsed to the ground. In an effort to make it a little bit different than the previous trainer, I decided to teach him how to pick me up off of the fence first. This allowed me to stay a lot safer. In the event that he would get scared and collapse again, I could just hold onto the fence and slip off of him. As time went on, he began getting stronger, and now that he could carry his body properly without fear, he was turning into a gorgeous moving horse. Other horses came and went through my program, and Pete just kind of hung out, and I chipped away with his training little bits at a time until finally I was able to put the very first ride on him. Given how I acquired this horse and his extreme fear of people when I got him, this was a huge deal for Pete. I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit nervous the first time I took him out for a spin, but I made sure that he was well prepared to do everything that I was going to ask him, and he got through his first ride being able to steer both directions. He could stop and back up as well. There really wasn't much difference between his first ride and the first ride that I put on all of my other horses. He never did get comfortable with picking me up off the ground, so I have always gotten on him from the fence, which is not ideal, but it seemed to work pretty well for him. It took me 2 whole years to get this horse comfortable enough to carry me around. Some people may think that's ridiculous, but it is the amount of time that I thought it took for his brain to really calm down and trust me. It is wild to think that 2 weeks in the wrong hands took me 2 years to undo. Since Pete could still be quite volatile, he kind of went on the back burner. I put more rides on him here and there as my time allowed. But because I knew he would be an extremely hard horse to rehome, I just decided that I would keep him as long as I need to. He would have moments of greatness where I could feel the kind of horse he could turn into. And then the next day I would raise my hand in a weird way and he would have a complete come apart. After I had had Pete for 3 years, I decided to do some more sleuthing on the internet. Since he was registered, I was able to find some baby pictures of him. I also found some information on his mama and his daddy, who I think Pete is the spitting image of. They are the same pretty seal brown color, and they have the same puppy dog eyes. I tagged his breeder in one of his pictures. She messaged me almost immediately and was super thankful that he was safe and sound. I ended up getting a lot more information about Pete and how he was bred. He was registered and he was bred to be a pretty high performance barrel horse, which is obvious when he's running with the other horses in the pasture. I know a lot of people think it's silly I contact the old owners and breeders, but I think it is an important part of the horse's story that is worth investigating. Sometimes I forget exactly how long I've had Pete. He really tries to be a sweet horse on the inside, but every once in a while the trauma from his past peeks through. He is the kind of horse that you have to be very understanding with. And at 10 years old, he still has a very immature mind. Things that don't bother other horses can really set him off. And most of his training is just me doing silly things over and over again until he calms down. I'm not really sure what the future holds for Pete, but he will have a permanent spot at my barn. I unfortunately see a lot of horses like Pete at auctions. A really bad experience at an overly aggressive trainer can impact the horse for the rest of their lives. Although these horses can be the hardest type of horse to rehome, I will continue to take a chance on them in the hopes that one day maybe they'll recover from their past training. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for the next video.